Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Don Stevens Radio Show. I'm your host, Don Stevens, and the New Hampshire Republican primary is now in the history books, and I'm here talking to you about the results at least a day late, two if you're listening to this tomorrow. Today's show is being recorded on January 11th, 2012. And the winner of the New Hampshire primary was Mitt Romney, effectively with 40% of the vote. Ron Paul with 23% of the vote. John Huntsman came in third with 17% of the vote. Newt Gingrich came in a distant, approximately 10% of the vote. Rick Santorum virtually tied Newt Gingrich with 10% of the vote. He got 0.7%. Michelle Bachmann 0.1%. She's out of the race. And other, which we can only assume is me, got 1.3% of the vote. But I'm not giving up my candidacy. I'm not ready to quit yet. But yes, so Mitt Romney won New Hampshire. Now he's won Iowa and New Hampshire both. Now that's a sign. That's a sign that people in Iowa and people in New Hampshire that are Republicans want Mitt Romney to win the election. Now, the real interesting thing here is that with 23% of the vote, Ron Paul came in second. And this is fascinating to me because New Hampshire is not the most conservative state. I understand that, but out of all of the candidates, that call themselves conservatives, real conservatives that call themselves real conservatives, Newt, Rick, and Rick, they together didn't even get 30% of the vote. They got under just over 20% of the vote. And Newt Gingrich was talking in Iowa that you've got to be able to put up bigger numbers than 25%. Well, Newt, you've got to be able to put up bigger numbers than 9.4% in the New Hampshire primary if you have any dream of being the Republican nominee. And that probably goes for Rick Santorum, too. Rick Perry, I don't expect much out of him. Now, John Huntsman with a 16.9% after spending all the time that he spent in New Hampshire and all the money that he supposedly spent in New Hampshire. This must be very upsetting for him that Ron Paul got second place. Now, Ron Paul supporters will tell you that they're out to win it, but I think everyone can safely assume that Ron Paul, that he's happy with this second place. His message is getting out to the American people, and if he continues to perform this well all the way through the primaries, this man is going to have a voice at the Republican convention this coming year. So Ron Paul is doing just what he said he was going to do. He's running for president. And the funny thing is that he says that he finds it funny that people say that he's not electable. And he says all these people that are electable, they're failing miserably with 10% of the vote, or not even garnering 1% of the vote, like as in Rick Perry. So, he's been elected some 12 or so times in his district. Now the reality is that it's easier to get elected to a congressional seat than it is to get elected to the President of the United States, and that's true for the Senate and for the House. But hey, he's got a good point. He is getting serious votage here. 56,848 votes. And the closest person to him was John Huntsman with 41,945 votes. Now, nationally, that's just a drop in the hat, that many votes. But in one state, in one party's primary, that's pretty damn impressive. So, look, Ron Paul, he may not be your choice for President of the United States. You may not like his foreign policy, but you have to admit that he's got lots of good and valid points specifically when it comes to the United States economy. Another thing that I want to talk about is Newt, Rick, and Rick's attack on Mitt. And we'll do that after I tell you about this really cool device. It's called a thumb drive. It's like 2 gigabytes, 8 gigabytes, 16 gigabytes, 32 gigabytes. I don't know how many gigabytes it goes to, but screw the cloud. Screw putting your information on something that you have no idea who can look at it, and you have no idea what scandals going to come about from the cloud. You know what I'm saying? Keep crap on your computer locally, back it up, store it locally in a safe. But if you do have to take a document from one place to another, these USB thumb drives are awesome. Lots of people make them, lots of people sell them. Go to your big box retail store today or your computer store today and get yourself a thumb drive and say no to the cloud. All right, welcome back to the Don Stevens Radio Show. Now, both Newt Gingrich, Rick Santorum, and Rick Perry don't think Mitt Romney is conservative enough. And you know what? They're right. I'm going to come out right now and say it. They're absolutely correct. He's simply not conservative enough. But I'm telling you this right now. He's the most conservative candidate running for president of the United States right now that has a snowball's chance in hell. And I'm sorry, Ron Paul, guys. It's not that I don't think your man's electable, because clearly he can pull in the numbers. And some polls say that Obama, Romney, and Paul are at a 3-way tie in polling. But I don't think he's going to make it all the way through the Republican primary. I may be wrong, but I just don't see it happening. I'm going to continue to cover him. I'm going to continue to give him time on the show and talk about him and the things he says, because I think he is the most viable, real candidate in this election other than Mitt Romney. Now, that may change after South Carolina. Rick Perry or Rick Santorum may get a win in South Carolina. And I'm going to tell you this right now, and I'm sorry, listeners that really like Newt Gingrich, he's not going to win South Carolina. Newt is done. The only role he plays in this is trying to be a spoiler. And if that's what he wants to do, then so be it. He'll do it. That's fine. But Newt Gingrich doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell. And this is not the mainstream media talking to you about this. This is a conservative, someone who has voted conservative his entire life, telling this to you. Newt is not going to make it. Newt is old news. Rick has a chance. Rick Santorum has a chance in South Carolina. Rick Perry really does have a really good chance in South Carolina. But my prediction for South Carolina is that whoever wins it, Ron Paul is going to come in a strong second. I hope you enjoyed the last show. We talked about states' rights. And I think it's very important that I talk about that more frequently. And while I'm not going to talk about states' rights today, we will do that more in the future. And it's very important for you to understand, and the people of this country to understand, what states' rights are and what it really means. Because a lot of history teachers teach history, specifically Civil War history, and they talk about one of the reasons why we went to war was over states' rights, and it's always married with slavery. And there's always some idiot that tries to bring up slavery when states' rights is brought up, and that's just not. Look, man, slavery is not a state's right. It is covered in the Constitution of the United States. So therefore, I mean, that's a moot point. These idiots need to just shut up. But I'm so glad that we did get to talk about states' rights in the last episode of the Don Stevens Radio Show. But back to what I was talking about before, the Republican primary race. I'm going to have a sip of my coffee here. I had a long day at work. I'm very tired now, but I just so enjoy talking to you all about this. So I'm going to, regardless of the fact that I'm tired. Now, John Huntsman, Newt Gingrich, Rick Santorum, and Rick Perry have all been, pigpiling on Mitt Romney over his history with Bain Capital. Bain Capital is a company that comes in and buys companies to write them or to make money off them in some way. And as a company that comes in to take over a company and save it, as a company, sometimes you have to lay people off. This is a reality, and companies who lay people off are not in and of themselves uh, evil incarnate. I mean, they're not the coming of the Antichrist just because they lay companies off. Sometimes a company, if they don't lay people off, goes away forever and never produces jobs. Other companies that have to lay people off, they come back stronger later on and they hire more people than they had the first time around. So I think it's very important that we understand that Bain Capital and Mitt Romney in and of itself was not the primary evil in the situation. The primary evil was that the company was failing in some way before they came around. And, there are many examples of where they had to lay people off and they had to have whatever skeleton of a company that they had or whatever they sold off to competitors. And then there are examples like Staples, where apparently Bain Capital, and Domino's, where apparently Bain Capital did some really good work. And now they're very strong, viable companies, from what I understand. And the only candidate to speak any intelligence on this issue is Ron Paul. And it's quite sad that so many people that are supposedly conservatives, they're qualifying their conservatism in order to attack Mitt Romney on his work with Bain Capital. Now, a lot of my listeners out there, uh, especially some of them in the Boston area, they don't like Mitt. They don't like Mitt Romney at all. Most of them are Democrats that I talk to, but they don't like him and they don't want him there. They think that he is out to make a buck no matter what. And I got to think that having a president of the United States that's out to fix our economic problems no matter what, just like he did when he was with Bain Capital, can't be an entirely bad thing. Can it? Is it a perfect thing? Maybe not, but it can't be an entirely bad thing. But the fact is, Mitt, is there are a lot of conservatives out there that don't think you are up to it, and they don't trust you. They don't trust you like I don't trust Newt Gingrich because I've been listening to Newt, and they look at your record, Mitt, and some of them don't understand the difference between running a state government and a federal government, and some of them think that you may not know the difference between running a state and federal government, and that is going to be your obstacle. But the fact is Rick Perry, Rick Santorum, Newt Gingrich, and John Huntsman have been behaving like children, like liberal children, and it's just pathetic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here at the Don Stevens Show, one of the things that we think is a very, very important tool in life is a credit card. And if you can behave responsibly and pay off your debt and not accumulate more and more and more and more debt like we all have in the past, I encourage you to get a credit card. You can get credit cards that will pay you miles, will pay you points, will pay you awards, will do all kinds of things. But if you are irresponsible with your money in any way as a person, like we have all been in the past, then you need to stay away from credit cards. And there are other options out there. There's a debit card that will work like a credit card as long as you have money in the bank. So, my friends, just do yourself a favor. If you can afford and responsibly use a credit card, then utilize this tool. If you can't, then don't. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the Don Stevens radio show today. There's a lot going on in this world right now, in the world of politics, in the world of entertainment and sports, like, for example, the Broncos. Can you believe the Broncos beat the Steelers? Wow, that was amazing. There's a little idol worship going on with this Tim Tebow guy. Christians are getting that are very happy that another Christian is doing such a good job, are getting a little creepy with their idolatry of this man. Not to mention he's in an ad where he appears topless, and I just got to think that someone who's really a Christian that professes the things that he does. I'm not saying myself as a Christian believes this necessarily, but he professes the things in the way he does, and apparently not into having sex before marriage and is against abortion and stuff like that. And I got to think that maybe appearing without his shirt is going to incite some lust. What do you think about that? Maybe that's not the most Christian thing he can do. Now, I'm not saying that as a fact, but I'm thinking that maybe he needs to think about that because that's how he puts himself out there. And I'm going to end this by saying, there's this picture here on my big giant computer screen of Miley Cyrus at the 2012 People's Choice Award wearing a cream halter dress, and I mean, wow, I've never been a big giant fan of Miley Cyrus, but all I have to say to quote Garth Algar, swing, swing. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Don Stevens Radio Show, and we'll see you in a day or so.